Hi, this is Betty plus Books and Squiggles, and I am getting ready for Tome Topple, which is a readathon that focuses on reading books of 500 pages or more. So I will link to the announcement video by Sam, one of the hosts of Tome Topple, up here. And other than that, I just want to talk about some of my favorite books that are over 500 pages and books that I have on my TBR that would qualify for Tome Topple. For books I recommend, I want to focus on books that are either singletons or can be read as if they were singletons, because I know that just because you're doing a readathon doesn't mean you want to commit to like a 3-book series or a 5-book series or a 10-book series just because you want to have something to read for the first one. And I'm also going to go in order of lowest page count over 500 pages to highest page count. So if you're trying to get stuff in but you don't want it to be the entire Tome Topple, you can just pick something that is very close to 500 pages. The first thing I want to recommend is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is kind of a soft sci-fi that focuses on diversity through the lens of there being a broad amount of diversity in alien races. I thought it was really interesting, and if I remember correctly, even though this is the first installment of a series, it can be read very well as a standalone. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is 518 pages. If you want to try out a nonfiction book, one of the most useful nonfiction books I have is Antifragile by Nassim Taleb. This is a very dense book. I think this is really helpful in figuring out how to do things so that as you encounter unexpected things or chaos or problems, things get better rather than getting down and breaking down and getting worse. So kind of the analogy here is if you drop a glass and it breaks, that's a fragile thing. If you drop like a wooden bowl and nothing happens to it, that's robust. If you drop something and it becomes better, that's anti-fragile. So this book is based on that concept. Anti-Fragile is 1 page longer than The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, is 519 pages, although the writing is fairly tiny and dense, so it might take longer to get through, especially since it is nonfiction. Next, I want to recommend The Witch Elm by Tana French. Tana French writes the Dublin Murder Squad mysteries, and I really loved those, but those are a series. One of her standalone books is The Witch Elm, and that is a story about our protagonist who experiences a break-in, gets severely injured and kind of loses some of his cognitive abilities, and then he goes to move in with his uncle who's been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, and his girlfriend comes with him, and he's trying to like negotiate his change of identity of self with his different abilities. He's dealing with preemptive grief from his uncle's imminent demise. And on top of that, while they're at his uncle's house, they find a body, a skeleton that has been there for probably 10 or 20 years. So he's dealing with a lot in that book. I really enjoyed that book. It's kind of emotional. And The Witch Elm is 528 pages. The next book is a graphic novel. So even though it's also 528 pages, it will read much faster. That book is Solutions and Other Problems by Allie Brosh, and she has written a graphic novel before. You've probably seen some of her comics and memes like this one. This is a pretty emotional graphic novel. As she was writing this, it seemed like a lot of aspects of her life were really changing in traumatic ways. So be prepared for like sad emotional stuff if you go into this, but it was really, really good. It wasn't what you would expect from like a graphic novel or her style, which tends to be a little bit silly. My third 528 page recommendation is Middlegame by Seanan McGuire, and this was one of my favorite books of 2019. I really loved it, but then again, I love almost everything that Seanan McGuire puts out other than her like very ghost focused stories, which I don't like as much for some reason. This is a story of two long lost siblings that find each other, and I don't remember all of the details. I kind of want to go back and reread this book, but I think there's some kind of like saving the world kind of stuff going on. But it's really good, just like all of her other stuff. And if you want something from Seanan McGuire and you don't want to get into a series, since she writes so many series, maybe try this book. It's a modern day fantasy. It's kind of dark. It's really fun. It's kind of mysterious. I think you'll like it. Not my final recommendation, but my fourth and final 528 page recommendation, this is becoming a theme, is The Tiger's Daughter by Arsenault Rivera. Now this is not supposed to be a standalone, but it's one of those series where I read the first book, I loved it, and I read the second book and I was like, should have just kept with the first book as a standalone. So I would recommend reading this book. It's a fantasy story about two women who fall in love. I don't remember if women falling in love is actually prohibited in this society. Again, this is one of those that I loved when I read it, but now I don't remember any of the details, but I highly recommend it anyway. What I do remember about this book is that the emotions in it are very poignant, and the book really focuses on like cultural differences and resolving those. I think I heard some backlash about this book being racist or something, but I kind of read it as like a made-up race, so if you're concerned about that, maybe go read some of the critical reviews about whether or not it was problematic. I'll let you figure out whether or not you want to approach that with that in mind. Now, if you're into speculative sci-fi, you might like Kiln People by David Brin. This book looks at what you could do if you could replicate yourself into multiple bodies, have your body doubles go out and do things for you, and then come back and absorb the memories. And what happens if one of those wants to branch out and become its own person? That clocks in at 576 pages, and my next one also clocks in at 576 pages. That is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. This is a story that follows some American gods that have some human-like foibles. It was a little dark, a little gritty. I remember it being a little bit slower paced. I gave it 4 stars though. I enjoyed it even though it did seem slow paced to me. So if it's slow paced and I still like it, it's probably very good because I tend to be reading a lot more fast paced things these days. If you want something historical fiction, I would recommend James Michener's Hawaii. We're jumping way up on the page count list here. This is 1,136 pages and it is very slow paced. I had a hard time getting through it, and as a result I rated it kind of low, but I can see a lot of the merits in it. It draws a lot from actual history of what happened in kind of the American acquisition, colonization of Hawaii, and this historical fiction goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's really a generational story. You're following family lines over so many generations, which is just not my kind of book. If you do enjoy that kind of book, you might like this a lot. And then finally, the absolute longest book I think I have ever read, we have Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. And yes, this is actually a fan fiction of some sort under the name Eliezer Yudkowsky. So this is a book wherein it's basically looking at what would have happened in Harry Potter if there was a wizard who was the chosen one, who was really smart and could get around all of the little things that were for some reason rules of magic that weren't really deeply enough explained by the actual original Harry Potter universe. And I think it actually makes Harry a much more complex character than he is in the original universe. If I remember correctly, it gives Hermione a much more prominent role. So overall, I remember really liking this. I thought a lot of the ideas they toyed with in regards to, well, what if you took this rule of magic and kind of reconceptualized it inside your own head in order to do something different? What could you do if you harnessed the exchange rate of galleons and nuts and the gold value thereof compared to like regular muggle money? Why in Quidditch do they end the game with catching a snitch rather than having a timer? I thought it was a lot of fun, and so that's something I recommend. Okay, we're finally done with the recommendations. I thought I was going to have a lot less given that I wanted to focus on not just series books. If it were series books, I would have had like dozens more. So no. So now let's talk for a few minutes about the tomes that are on my TBR. So the one I own physically on my shelf that I'm going to be reading for Tome Topple is Death's End by Cixin Liu. This is the 3rd book in the trilogy started by the 3-body problem. I think the series is just called the 3-body trilogy. The first couple of books kind of look at what would happen if we had kind of a standoff with extraterrestrial potential invaders. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the 3rd book. I vaguely remember what happened in the 1st and 2nd book, so I'm going to have to do a recap. I really love one part in the 1st book where they kind of go through and they explain how a computer functions in a way that's not dry, it's not boring, it's really fascinating. And they kind of puzzle out different things about how certain universes work based on different visual models and representations, and I thought that was really cool. So I'm going to be trying to get through this 604 page book over the course of Tome Topple. I need to remember what dates Tome Topple is. Tome Topple is October 18th through the 31st, so that's 13 days, 14 if you include going to the 1st of November, starting at midnight, ending at midnight. So I'll be reading Death's End during that time. It's 600 pages, so if I stick to my roughly 100 pages a day attempt, then I should be able to finish it in 6 days. The other book I plan to read for that is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, so that is the 3rd book in the Poppy War series, and I gave 5 stars to the first 2, so I'm sure I'll love that. That is 622 pages, so again, it should take me about 6 days if I stay on track with my 100 pages a day. So I should be able to get through both 2 books about this thick in those 14 days. If I read really fast, I might be able to get one more book in. So let's look at our list and see if we can pick something out, because we like being ambitious. Okay, so I was looking at my TBR, and according to Storygraph, one of the books that I've been really excited about reading, which is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, is 544 pages. So I'm going to put that also on my TBR. That will bring me up to having to read about 1,750 pages in that 14 days. So I'm not really sure I can do that, but I'm really excited to start that. The YouTuber Books With Zara has been recommending Joe Abercrombie over and over again. The way she describes it, it sounds like the characters will be amazing and the story will be engaging, and that there will be so much to read by him after I finish the first one if I like it. So I'm just gonna do it. I might want to, before Tome Topple starts, finish some of the series, because I've been really trying to not start new series while I still have a bunch lingering, and I still have a bunch lingering right now, so I'm gonna get on that. So that is my very long-winded explanation of all of the books that I would recommend you read for Tome Topple, and the 3 books that I plan to read for Tome Topple. I believe when I saw the announcement, it said that there were challenges that like brought you up to maybe reading like 7 books. I find it highly unlikely that I would end up reading 7 books of over 500 pages in 14 days. That would be about 250 pages a day, which I have done before. I think I actually did it recently with a book I was really liking, but I would have to love every single one of those books, like a lot, the entire time that I was reading them. Not likely. I don't usually read that many books that I love that much in a row, so that's probably not going to happen. I usually, with challenges, try and hit every single challenge, but no, I'm not going to do that at this time. Anyway, that is it for my video for today. I hope you enjoyed these recommendations, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about what I plan to read. Please cheer me on for the Tome Topple readathon in whatever way you can in the comments, or otherwise tell me what you plan to read during Tome Topple if you're planning on participating. If you still want to see more about that, go see Sam's video on Thoughts with Tomes, or just type into YouTube Tome Topple announcement. I'm sure you'll come up with all of the announcement videos. But anyway, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you liked it, and I will see you next time. Happy reading. Oh, you're leaving? I start talking and you leave? Traitor! Traitor!